I'm really, really happy that this event was created because this is, to me, this has always been at the core of why I love Windows 10. I know that both myself and Marius have been working with Windows as a service from the start of Windows 10, and it hasn't been easy, I think, at any point. But today we'll talk about how to use Microsoft Intune and how to really minimize the amount of management needed from our side to make Windows as a service work and to create that best possible user experience as well. My name is Simon. I work as a principal technical architect at Trusec in Sweden, endpoint manager, MVP, and I've been sort of an Windows as a service evangelist from the start. So you will be getting a bunch of links later on, and some of them are to my old blog with some old years on them, but a lot of that content is still valid today. So I hope you can enjoy a lot of that. And who are you, Marius?
Yes, I'm Marius Wies. I'm a custom engineer, aka PFE in Switzerland, and I'm doing all the endpoint stuff, which is Windows 10 endpoint, Intune, and SCCM or Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Yep.
Cool. And when did you start working with Windows as a service?
Early on, yeah, I was also kind of an evangelist on the servicing piece, and yeah, I had some internal presentations on it. Julie was part of it, and Julie kind of took that to a higher level, actually.
Yeah, great. So the thinking around this session is that I'll soon present my screen and show the Microsoft Endpoint Manager portal and look into Intune and Windows 10 update rings. And I'll combine like the different aspect of the update rings and how to configure them with what I feel is the essential part of Windows as a service, and that is to find the process that works for your organization, and also being aware of the challenges that we may have with infrastructure. So we have had a bit of a rant in the chat for the ones who haven't been able to read that on everything is security's fault, network's fault, or anything else other than ours fault. And in practice, it can be like that sometimes, but we'll be getting into that in a few minutes as well. And as always, of course, feel free to ask questions in the chat. We have a couple of great colleagues that are answering them, and we'll, of course, answer as many questions as we can, either in the chat afterwards or in the Q&A session. So I'm not a presenter anymore. Did I lose my promotion?
No, let me fix that.
Sorry if I misbehaved in any way and is unworthy of being a presenter. Hooray.
Did it work? Because I got a failed message.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it seems to have worked.
Perfect.
There we go.
Failed successfully.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's yeah, that could be like the headline for this session as well. So in Microsoft Intune, and I'll just ensure to have that one running as well. We have Windows 10 update rings, and I have a few here, and so should you have in general. You should have multiple rings, and we'll get into the dynamics of those as well.
Sorry, Simon, can you maybe zoom once or twice on your screen? It's a little bit fuzzy.
Yep, I will do that. Whoops.
I would just do it in the browser directly, probably.
Yeah, that's what I thought I was doing. Yeah, okay. Is that better?
Yeah, that works.
Yep, cool. So don't take the number of days here as some kind of rule. It's entirely up to you. This is just for demo purposes. So let's head into properties, and we'll use one of my old ones. So before you start really configuring these, I would highly advise you to look into how does your organization actually looks. What requirements do you have? Which of your devices are suitable to be managed by Intune alone or in co-management? Because we had one other question in the chat as well, like asking how do we do this over CMG? And my view on that is that you should look into which of your devices are suitable for fully Intune managed scenario, which are suitable for a co-managed scenario, and which are suitable for a CMG-based scenario. Because I find that there are so much great content out there for CMG, for co-management, that there are some organizations that are implementing that kind of technology where Intune alone possibly could have been a better choice, depending on where you're getting content, how mobile you are, connection, and so on. So just think about that and ensure to understand your organization, understand the applications you have, just like Paul showed previously. We can't use desktop analytics with Intune currently, but there are other ways of getting that information, and we'll be getting back to that later on. But once you're in your update rings, you select your servicing channel, and in here we have semi-annual channel and some insider channels. And in general, and we'll be summarizing that later on, do you use the insider channels as well? Because every single day that you can use to prepare for that actual rollout is valuable to you. The more time you have for one new feature update, the better, and the earlier you can start, the better. So I can highly advise you to also start using Windows Insider Rings in your organization too. But for now, we'll focus on semi-annual channel. We can then choose if we want to update other Microsoft products and Windows drivers, and that will be done using Windows Update, of course. And that's highly dependent on how you prefer to do it in your other management tools. But then we get into the real challenge from a mindset perspective. And that is that we shouldn't keep looking into specific days, specific dates, specific times when we should install patches. It should be when we need to. And this is a pilot ring, so it's a very fast cadence. But what we configure here is the deferral period in days from when a specific update is released. So let's take Patch Tuesday as an example, even though patches can be released at any time. From Patch Tuesday, it will now show these updates for the clients the same day when they are released, and they will be made available to the device. And we have different days for quality updates and feature updates. And since we're focusing on feature updates today, we'll look into that primarily. So in this case, 7 days after a new feature update is being released, they will be visible if they are released to that device, of course, after 7 days. And that's really the first gate you have. You can give yourself 7 days, a month, the amount of time you feel that you need to feel confident in a feature update. But sorry about that. But the more you have prepared using your insider rings, the less time I would advise you to have here. And this isn't forcing the update, and that's important to remember. It's only making it available. And then we have the uninstall period, and we'll be getting back to that as well, because I often hear, and I've been working with Intune for years and years, probably since the start, that yeah, but like Intune isn't as powerful as Config Manager. And the update uninstallation period will definitely show that there are some things Intune can do, which is freakishly powerful, and that I find as a very, very good use case for Intune in general. So the feature update uninstall period is for how many days will we be able to go back to the previous feature update on a particular machine. Then we head down to user experience. And that's why we're here in practice. It would be so simple to service Windows if it weren't for those users. But in practice, that's why we're here. We need to create the best possible user experience. And a lot of you that are here are from education. And I, at one point, were speaking to a representative from one of the bigger cities in Sweden. And he was furious. He was furious because he thought that this Windows servicing thing Microsoft needs to change that, and we have 10,000 seats, so they should listen to us. And we try to explain to this person that I don't think that will happen. So why are you angry? And what he said were, yeah, but we can't force our users to have the devices down for updates and reinstalling at all times and so on. So I said to him, okay, so and they were using config manager and task sequences at that point. So you mean that you in 18 months can't find 2 hours to update a machine? Then I'm sorry for your students. And then he calmed down, because it's all about when updates happen and so on. So you're able to set active hours and start and end. So how should we first and foremost install the updates? How to install is what I prefer, but do remember that an update isn't really installed until you have restarted the device. But in most cases, auto install at maintenance time, and then we have other ways of controlling the actual reboot there. We have maintenance time, which will auto install and restart at a time you set. At the scheduled time, that's what I'm using for point of sale systems, kiosks and such, so we know when it's happening. And we also have one which is without end user control, which could be applicable in some instances, but I tend to use at the scheduled time anyways. We have the possibility to do restart checks. So should we reinstall or restart this device? Is it connected? Is everything in order? And then we have some options to actually allow the user to configure their updates themselves. So would we want them to have the possibility to pause updates, or would we like them to have the possibility to check for updates themselves, so they can say that, yeah, now it's a good time to install it, even though I may not have received a prompt to install anything, I would like to get my patches. And then we have a couple of other restart options here. But then we also have the deadline, and this is where you really can force it out. And I tend to say, and this is communication, it's process, it's the core of Windows as a service to me. Give users option to the extent that you can. But if they don't choose to use those options, then you are, in many cases, free to help them choose. So we can say that after the update have been made available to you, when do you need to install it? So I tend to publish updates rather early and giving the users a lot of time to themselves choose when to actually install it. But then we have the deadline, and when the deadline's there, I usually tend to force that install and possibly even a reboot, because they've had enough time based on the intelligence that we have gathered around the organization to install that by themselves. So we are quite flexible, and this is only the things that are available here. There are a bunch of other ways to automate this, of course. And in general, I actually target this to users in many cases, depending on the organization, of course, because in general, it's up to the user, not the actual device, to how up to date should the user be. You can target it to devices as well. It's depending on your organization, but I actually tend to do it for users if it's a one-to-one relationship between a user and a device. So you configure this, and you configure this based on, I really messed up the zooming here. And you base that on, again, how much flexibility do you need? How many groups of users can you find in your organization? How much flexibility should they have? Do you have different kinds of point of sale kiosks, devices, and so on? So it's no problem to have a lot of these, but I tend also to ensure that one device only shows up in one so that you really are able to get a good understanding of what will happen to that. And then we deploy them and they start to run. And that's where the set and forget comes in. Because once these are set, you shouldn't be caring about them up until something breaks. And I tend to find that updates breaks fairly seldom. It can be application that breaks, of course, and that's why you have your pilot, to find things that break. And if things break, you can control these rings from Intune itself and pause updates. That will mean that no more devices will be able to see this update until you decide that they should. And that goes for both feature and quality updates. So you have full control over what happens if something breaks. And if you at some point have installed patches and it's really broken, it's too late to pause, then this comes in, the uninstall option. And this is where I find Intune to be so extremely powerful, so extremely friendly to both us and the users, because from here you can say that uninstall the latest feature update, and that's where you have these days, because that will take up a certain amount of space on your hard drive. So for how many days are you able to move back to the previous feature update? And you can do that from here, but you can also do that for quality updates, of course, and push it back to the previous cumulative update. So that really gives you the confidence as well to go fast with Windows as a service and get those patches out there, which will increase your security as well as hopefully the user experience. But it's not always that we want to install the latest feature update. At some points, we want to control which update and how it's deployed and how long we're running it for, like some of you said in the chat, for specific purposes, hardware, software compatibility. And that's where Marius comes in, and he will give you some even new insights to me in terms of how they work and what you should think about when managing your feature updates with Intune. So Marius, are you ready?
Yes.
You can take over the sharing.
Can you share the PowerPoint too?
Yes, sorry. I promised to do that. Sorry about that.
No, don't worry. So if there is a constraint and we need to pin a certain version of Windows 10, and we want to control when these in-place upgrades are going to be happening, then we have this feature called Windows 10 Feature Update preview, and that is fairly simple. You give it a name, you give it a description, and you kind of select which build is going to be frozen. Can you click? There's some text on the left side. Yeah, just give me all of them. What it requires to, what this requires though is that the update rings are being set to 0 on the feature update deferral period in order for that to work. And again, it's really simple. You give it a name, you select the build that you want to freeze, and you deploy it to the machines you want to have this build set to.
Is that working now? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
so
go ahead. I'm not hearing anything anymore.
Is there a question?
It keeps saying to the size of the call automatically muted. Okay. Anyways, aren't those keys USB-A only? I know we talked about it before, where all new machines are going to start having less keys, or less of those ports.
I don't.
I think that's on a different call, huh?
Yeah.
The next model is going to have 2 USB-C ports.
All right,
Chris, you're in the wrong call.
Anyhow,
next model will not have those USB ports because it's successfully. We're gonna remove those ports with the next upgraded Windows 10.
No USB-C ports on Surface devices. So, yeah. Anyhow, again, so the deployment ring needs to be set to 0 on the deferral period for it to work. The devices still get the quality and security updates from the settings you have configured in the update rings. So that still continues on. It's just only getting the ones from the build you have set it to. In this example, what have I set it to 2004. Another requirement is that the OS needs to be at least 1803. And the devices need to be obviously Intune MDM managed, and telemetry needs to be set to basic. It works with the hybrid joints, the Azure AD joint, obviously, and the Azure AD registered. Not autopilot devices though. And maybe the next slide explains why that is. So yeah. There's a bit of a misconception on this feature actually. Even I fall into that. I thought, oh, this one is kind of a policy which is being sent down to the machine, and there will be some registry key or whatever, a CSP configured, and it freezes the machine to a certain version. That's not the case. That is actually, it's all happening on the back end. So whenever you assign that policy, it kind of joins your Azure AD device with the telemetry data, and then registers that device to Windows Update. And that usually takes up to a half day. I think in the official docs we even say a day. And once that has happened, the next time the machine doesn't need to be online. The next time the machine comes back online and does a scan, it will get only offered the updates from the build you have it set it to, in this case 2004, for instance. So yeah, this is really something you need to know here, that this is not a policy being configured on the client device itself. It's something that is happening on the back end, and it registers it to the Microsoft Update service kind of. What else?
And why is this important to understand, or why did it say that autopilot devices aren't supported or working?
To be completely honest, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe since autopilot have not sent telemetry data when it's doing autopilot yet, so it will not be able to join you this Azure AD device with the telemetry data, as there is no telemetry data. Therefore, it cannot be registered in the Microsoft Update service to be pinned to a certain build. And yeah, that is kind of the reason why.
Yeah. So the scenario is that you in an autopilot state, and correct me now if I'm wrong, Marius, would be in the place where the device gets up and running, but since it may get a feature update pushed to it prior to this process happening, then it may update before or in the first hours of its lifetime, really. And therefore, you can't be certain that that device will stay in the Windows version that it was delivered with. Is that correct?
Right, yes.
Yeah.
And actually on this scenario, if you do autopilot, let's assume it's a brand new device, you might get anyways the latest Win 10 version from your vendor. And therefore, yeah, this is kind of... Yeah.
That also makes total sense. And also this, and I'm going to be very honest here, when you explained this to me, I was like, didn't know that. And that also explains why my brand new VMs, when I'm been testing this out, weren't behaving as I expected, since they couldn't. So I think this is a very good takeaway, and I think this will enable more organizations to actually use this, because I believe that many have run into the situation where it doesn't seem to work. It doesn't do what it's intended to do. Okay, then we'll do it in another way. So I hope that many of you that are listening to this can now understand it better and leverage this technology. So are you using this for any of your customers currently, Marius?
Yes, and actually that was some kind of misconception they had, and even I at the beginning, that it wasn't really working at the beginning. And all they did do was a test with brand new machines where no telemetry data was being sent up yet. And that's why it has never really registered in Windows Microsoft Update. Yeah. There are quite some large customers here in Switzerland, actually, that do use that successfully. With
Great.
that caveat of autopilot, but yeah, that's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
There's some workarounds in there for that, but yeah, get in touch with me if you want to have a workaround on that.
Yeah. And with that, it's time to summarize, really. And I have 3 takeaways, and Marius, please feel free to pitch in on any of them. Before you do anything other than before you do anything else, ensure to have that process set up for your organization. There are a bunch of great resources. I've linked to some. Adam have a few. Like there are so many people that have written and spoken about the process of Windows as a service out there. Ensure to get that into your organization and get executives to understand that this will impact in a positive way the entire organization. Look into your infrastructure. We didn't have time to look into that, but I also find that when you're using Microsoft Intune, you also, in most cases, want to leverage delivery optimization. And especially in schools where you have a huge amount of devices running on Wi-Fi, that may not always be the simplest case due to misconfigurations from our point of view in the network, where peer-to-peer, as an example, isn't available. So ensure to understand your infrastructure, how to design your update rings to reflect that, and also to deliver optimization, and talk to your security and networking team. And I couldn't agree more with, I think Adam was ranting a bit in the chat, but I have actually recommended the same solution to some of my clients. If the networking team doesn't want to have that dialogue, because it needs to be a dialogue, try it and show that this will break your internet, your network, if you do not do anything to change that. And in the end, we are here for the users. We need to talk to them, we need to make them understand, and we need to be very considerate of how we are designing our update rings so that the users don't get disturbed in the middle of their work or in the middle of a presentation or whatever it may be. So process, infrastructure, and users are the key takeaways. And all of this can then be applied to your technology solution of your choice. And I often hear that, yeah, but this takes time, and like this is slow and it doesn't work, and Intune has always been slow. And that's not true. And I would say it doesn't take time. It's about you taking your time to understand it and implement it properly. Because if you start early with your insider rings and then start with your semi-annual channel, you have plenty of time to make this work, regardless of the tool of your choice. Do you have anything to add, Marius?
No, thanks a lot, Simon.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Guys, there was a fair amount of questions in the chat. So I don't know if you want to try to answer any of those, or Julie, I don't know where we're at on time. I should have looked. I guess we're over time for this session, so we probably, if you guys can just jump in the chat and scroll back through and try to answer some of those, that would be great.
Yep, absolutely. And I think both of us will be here for the Q&A later on, but we'll scroll through the chat and answer as much as we can.
Awesome. Yeah. That was I really enjoyed that one. That was fantastic. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.